As well as being a recollection of meeting and photographing the wonderful Andrew Cotter and Olive and Mabel, I'd like to think this video is also a love letter to Marco. During the pandemic and the ensuing lockdowns, Andrew's videos were a real tonic for me. I'd spent weeks of inactivity waiting for some kind of normal to begin again, and then suddenly I got the call from Outside magazine to go and photograph Andrew at Marbury Country Park in Cheshire. Thunderstorms were predicted on the day of the shoot, so I was a little bit uneasy and decided to drive up the night before and cheekily ring him and suggest we meet up for a pre-shoot shoot in the evening. 99% of being successful at anything is often about turning up and maybe just being a little bit pushy. This was no different. The squeaky wheel will always get the oil. The dogs were boisterous and unruly, but every so often they'd pause, statue-like, a sort of canine yin and yang, and I'd get my picture. Andrew was very likeable, had a wry sense of humour, and given that he is famed for having this amazing voice, more photogenic and handsome than I'd expected. We shot in the hard directional light. It was quite noirish, it was contrasty, there was chaos in front of my lens, and briefly the dogs sort of came into the right position, Andrew was in the right position, and I had my picture, and then it went back to chaos. In Hollywood, they call that light the golden hour, because the light that you get before the sun sets is directional, but it's soft, and it's just lovely to work with. He showed me around the park, and we took advantage of the beautiful autumnal shades, and then eventually wound up back at the car. And as they were getting in, I took a couple of pictures of him sitting in the car with the two dogs. It was quite sweet and a revealing insight into his daily routine. After that, I watched them drive away. The following day, as planned, we reconvened in the rain for more pictures, but the light wasn't as good. The pictures seemed prosaic. I think we knew that we'd got what we needed the night before. It's always better to have less time if the light is magical. This was a relatively recent shoot, so I wasn't shooting on film, I was shooting on a digital camera. I used a Fuji GFX, a kind of medium format digital camera. I didn't have a tripod, I didn't have lighting. When you don't have much time, it's good to keep it simple. Less is sometimes a lot more. I remember thinking he's going to have a real advantage when it comes to the audiobook of Dog Days, A Year with Olive and Mabel. When the book came out, I was astonished to see that what had been, I assumed, a kind of another boring press obligation for him, our shoot, he'd included it in the prose in the book. Maybe the Cheshire experience planted a seed, because a year later I got Marco. We explained to my gullible son Florian that we were going to this farm to pick up a washing machine. And even when he was surrounded by puppies, it never occurred to him that his dream was about to come true. As you can see, Marco is a cockador, a less fashionable hybrid than some of the other dogs you might see around. And one of the reasons might be because of the big black fur balls that I'm constantly having to sweep up. A good starting point for photography is to photograph what you love. And I genuinely love Marco. He was named after my best friend Mark, who loved dogs and got me into photography in the first place when we were teenagers, and who sadly died in 2018 of esophageal cancer. I know that Mark would love Marco. I mean, he brings such colour to our lives. As I said, photograph what you love, and I love photographing Marco. It brings to mind the wonderful pictures of William Wegman, and he photographed his Weimaraner dogs in a multitude of different ways and produced an extraordinary body of work. So as well as being a recollection of meeting and photographing the wonderful Andrew Cotter and Olive and Mabel, I'd like to think this video is also a love letter to Marco. If you are contemplating getting a dog, I would say just do it. It's obviously a really serious commitment, but if you have the resources, it's a commitment that's definitely worth making.